Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto gets married on his training trip, part 2. Subscribe if you enjoy the video, let's start the story. Tsunade's eyes widened considerably upon hearing this. Jiraiya caught this look and smiled a proud smile. I know it's amazing, isn't it? A person usually takes at least a year to get up to that level, but he did it in 3 months. The boy is just amazing like that when he puts his mind to it. He trailed off slightly before a huge grin appeared on his face. Now I know this will freak you out. When I visited that 3rd month, I was shocked also. When I was watching him train in cover, I was spotted by the clan head that was also watching, and he motioned for me to come over. I did, and what a shock it was to hear that Naruto was only at the beginning level of his lightning manipulation. I questioned him about this, and all he did to demonstrate was point his pointer and middle finger off to the side. The next moment there was a massive chakra spike from him, and a bolt of lightning came out of his fingertips and traveled right through a tree he was pointing at and continued into the sky until it dissipated. Jiraiya was so into his story that he didn't see the wide-eyed Tsunade staring at him with her mouth slightly open gaping at him. Let me tell you, that scared the shit out of me and got the rest of the people's attention around us. That's when Naruto spotted me and we started to talk. After seeing the amazing display of power from the clan head, I wanted to see what Naruto could do. He refused to fight me personally, but he told me a little about what he learned. He couldn't go into detail because the clan head refused him the right to talk about it, but he told me some of his skills. Every time I visited I would always leave him some more scrolls, and he told me each time that he was able to master most of the ones I left him before. But that wasn't the skills I wanted to hear about. I wanted to learn about the ones he learned from the clan. He reluctantly told me what he learned. Can you believe it, Naruto is actually reluctant to brag. At that moment I knew I made the right choice to leave him there. He was maturing amazingly fast and growing stronger and stronger each time I saw him. After some nagging I was able to glean from him that he was currently learning how to handle a sword and further his already impressive lightning manipulation chakra. To say I was proud of him would be an understatement. I knew just by being around him that he was indeed learning fast. He was able to at that point suppress his chakra to a point where it only felt like high jounin. That's rather impressive seeing, as he had cage-level chakra reserves at that time. After I left that day I was more than confident that Naruto would develop into a fine man. He was even showing signs of being polite to authority figures and turning more normal and cool-headed to what he used to be like. He also lost all dark thoughts about the Sasuke retrieval mission. He seemed to have even forgotten it or gotten over it completely. He was turning into an amazing ninja and swordsman. This way of life for Naruto and me continued for another 11 months until I got a summoning by a frog. I knew instantly that it had to be from Naruto, as he's the only other person alive with a contract with frogs out there. With the frog came an envelope addressed to me by Naruto. When I opened it I got the surprise of my life when it turned out to be a wedding invitation to his and Akara's wedding. Of course I immediately went back to their clan compound to attend the wedding, as that is where it was said to be. I arrived 4 days early. When I went to talk to Naruto I was surprised to see him the happiest I've ever seen him in my life. He was just glowing with happiness. That also could have been the radiant smile coming from his equally happy fiancée that was hanging off his arm. That same day I saw them kiss and wow, what a kiss that was. I still don't know how to describe it right. It just seemed like they were meant for each other. I couldn't even force myself to start writing in my notebook like I usually do. It just seemed so right. Jiraiya sighed sadly as he took a big gulp of air before continuing. 3 days later, the entire clan was ready to leave. This confused me, but Naruto explained that they were having the wedding about 20 miles away. When we arrived we set up camp in the middle of a forest. I asked Naruto why we stopped here, but he just shooed me away and told me it was a secret and I'd find out the next day. I went to bed that day dejectedly, but was woken up early the next day before the sun could even arise. I asked why they would get up so early and they told me the wedding was going to start in less than 2 hours. I rushed to get ready and found out that everyone was being woken up all around me. The entire clan was there except for about 10 people. The entire clan consists of around 300 people in total. So it was rather busy. They were all prepared it seemed, and I was the only one that was left out of the loop on the wedding, so I just stuck to myself most of the time. That's when Naruto approached me and asked me to be his best man. I accepted graciously, of course. That's when I noticed what he was wearing. He was wearing a black suite that was customary for all weddings, but the thing that caught my eye would have to be the black cloak he was wearing, with the red lightning bolts running all over it. That was the same cloak he was wearing when he came in here with some minor adjustments, so it would be stronger and be able to repair itself. He led me out of the clearing and we walked for about 20 minutes, of which time he refused to answer any and all questions I had. When we finally came out of the trees and off the path we were walking, I felt my breath catch in my throat. We were in the most beautiful place I had ever seen in my life. It was still dark, but the moon provided enough light for me to see its beauty. We were standing on a cliff overlooking a waterfall with an amazing tree line in the background. Naruto told me that this was where they were having their wedding and that they were to wait until everyone arrived to start. Not 10 minutes later, we were surrounded by the entire clan and waiting for the bride to come. I got a surprise when 3 people came out of the crowd carrying different instruments. One was the harp, another was a flute, and the other one was a violin. They started to play the Here Comes the Bride chorus song that sounded beautiful. They must have done some kind of on them because each instrument was playing much louder than it should have been. At this point the sun was just starting to rise and it was the perfect setting for any dream wedding. That's when the bride came down the aisle of people. Akara was just radiating beautiful, there was just no other word for it. The wedding went as any other normal one would and they were married under the rising sun. When they kissed I could have sworn the sun shined on them for a few seconds, but it went by so fast it could have been my imagination. At that point in time they were announced husband and wife, with her name changing from Raisen Akara to Uzumaki Raisen Akara and Naruto's being changed to Uzumaki Raisen Naruto. They had to have Raisen in their name because clan law states if they knew the clan techniques, they needed their clan name. That was a perfect moment and the party afterwards was amazing too. They were both given 3 days for their honeymoon and Naruto told me straight out that if they were in any of my books, he would personally castrate me. The amount of killer intent he used was unreal and I was actually convinced not to spy on them, much to my disappointment. Especially seeing as when they returned to the compound she had a noticeable limp in her step. And that was 3 days after the wedding, so they must have been at it a lot. I lost so much glorious material there, I still can't believe I listened to the brat. Jiraiya was brought out of his mumbling when he felt killer intent being directed at him from the front. He looked up and paled seeing her crack her knuckles threateningly. "You know you lucky you didn't spy on them, right?" she asked in a sickly sweet voice that sent shivers down his spine. He could only nod as he subconsciously closed his legs so his equipment was well protected from her wrath. "I'm glad you understand my thoughts on that matter. You're also lucky I need you to finish the tale, otherwise you'd be in a world of pain right now," she threatened. Jiraiya could only nod his head shakily and continued on. Well, after the wedding and the honeymoon they came back to the compound and I learned that Naruto was officially a clansman and that sooner or later he and Akara would be clan heads. You remember that cloak I was talking about earlier? Well, that cloak represents him being a future clan head of the Raisen. With him finally being a part of the clan and having the position of future clan head, he was required to finish his training and learn their most powerful attacks. At this point I was requested to leave again and come back every month if I wanted to. After saying my blessings to the newly married couple, I left some more scrolls for Naruto to master like usual. Things went as usual, with the only exception being that Naruto and Akara were always together when I visited and Naruto was teaching Akara how to be more like a ninja. I'll let you know, she was a fast learner and adapted amazingly fast, almost as fast as Naruto does to learning new things. 5 months passed like this in a happy way. That is until the clan head decided to send Naruto, Akara and 20 guards to Wave Country to try and make a deal with them of some kind. I have no idea what the full details were on the deal, but I managed to find out they wanted to get food and supplies from them instead of a cloud country like they used to. Just as they were nearing the Great Naruto Bridge, things turned for the worst. Now let me tell you this first, I didn't learn about any of this until a month after it happened. I had just left Naruto at the compound when that same day the clan head told him that he had this mission. From what I gathered, he thought since Naruto helped the country out before, sending him out with the other negotiators would make the deal a no-go. He was quite right, by the way, but things never even got that far. Just when they were 100 feet from the bridge, they were ambushed by Iwa and Sound Ninja. Since I wasn't there I don't know the exact details, but I managed to gather a rather good description of what happened that day from the villagers of Wave and the clansmen that survived the battle held there. Tsunade sat straighter in her chair when hearing this news. She remembered reading a report about something happening near the waves around this time, but couldn't think of what exactly happened off the top of her mind. She was brought out of her thoughts when Jiraiya explained further. From what I understand, the Iwa and Sound Ninja attacked without warning, managing to kill 5 of their group straight off the bat and injuring 2 others. The others, including Naruto and Akara, were skilled enough to get out of the way of the initial attack. From there an all-out battle proceeded. They were greatly outnumbered from the beginning, with only 22 people on their side and around 100 Iwa and Sound Nin on the other side. It goes without saying that they were in trouble, and it showed when the enemy ninja managed to kill another 10 of the Raisen clan. Leaving Naruto, Akara, and 5 heavily injured others left to pick off. At this point the enemy ninja noticed that Naruto and Akara were covering each other's backs perfectly and none of their attacks were getting through. They somehow managed to separate them, and 5 went after Naruto while the rest of them went after Akara. It was at this point of the story that I realized, just as you must have, that their objective was to get to Akara. Tsunade could only nod in return, already seeing where the story was going, but urging Jiraiya to continue with a frown. He only nodded back before continuing. Once Naruto was able to defeat, and by defeat I mean kill, he has no illusions about what being a ninja is anymore and will kill without mercy now. He turned his attention back to his wife. By that time though, it was already too late for her. She had been stabbed with a kunai and a rock spear, and she lay motionless on the ground, but not before managing to kill off 10 of them first. Jiraiya's eyes took a darker shade of color when he continued. After seeing Akara down, Naruto rushed to her side, killing everyone in his way, but the others moved out of his way and started to retreat, seeing as their mission was over with. They must not have had orders to kill anyone else unless they interfered. When Naruto got to her side he fell to his knees and tried to wake her up, but she didn't move. He was desperate, I guess, because he tried to pump chakra into her body, but it did nothing. It was too late, she was dead. Jiraiya clenched his fists until they were white and shaking in anger. Tsunade could only look on while a feeling of dread overtook her. She was killed in cold blood. If I was there I would have massacred a lot of them without a second thought for destroying their perfect loving relationship. Luckily for me though, I didn't have to be there for that to happen. When Naruto finally understood she was dead I don't know if something must have snapped in him. He started to shake uncontrollably from all the emotions he was feeling, and one of the assholes that killed her had the nerve to stay and see how he would react to her death and laughed at him for his loss. He was beheaded before any of the ones that stayed to watch could even move to defend themselves. After his head hit the ground there was no sound whatsoever. The villagers I talked to told me it was like the eye before the storm. There was no wind to the sounds of people moving, not even the animals seemed to move. From what they said Naruto stood there shaking uncontrollably with his head hung low, so no one could see his face. He had his bloody sword in his right hand, holding it limply. When he finally looked up, the people I talked to said that a force of some kind descended upon them like a hurricane. They felt their bodies start to shake in fear and sweat uncontrollably. It's my guess that Naruto unleashed a massive load of killer intent to cause a mass effect like that. When he looked up he stared straight at his first victim. He charged at them, and after that he killed every enemy ninja in the area, which were around 30 people left. I'm sure you know the name this event was called. Jiraiya asked, looking at her. He could see she understood what was reported to her now. The massacre of Wave. She mumbled just loud enough for Jiraiya to hear her. Said man nodded grimly, but with a small smile on his face. Hi, the massacre of Waves is indeed what that incident was called, and that is also the reason Naruto is wanted in both Iowa and Sound countries with an S-rank bounty on his head. They only have a description of him, not a name, but my guess is that sooner or later they'll find out who he is. After he killed everyone in the immediate area he proceeded into the forest where the rest of the ninja retreated to. The townspeople never saw what happened in the forest, but they could hear screams coming from within, and later found around 30 bodies scattered around the area in various ways of death. After it got quiet again Naruto came out of the forest with a murderous glint in his eyes, and he was covered in blood, both in body and sword. When he saw Akara though, that glint subsided into something the villagers couldn't really register, but my best guess would say it was a copious amount of sadness and regret for not protecting her. After staring at her body for a couple seconds they saw him pick her up as gently as possible and proceeded back into the forest, but when the 2 remaining clansmen that survived went to follow him, they were shot a murderous glare and stayed put. He came back around 30 minutes later with a new set of clothes on and all the blood gone from his body. That's not important though, the important thing is that he was carrying Akara's body in his arms, but this time there was no kunai and a rock spear embedded in her body. She was wearing a new set of clothes and was looking like nothing had ever happened except for the fact she was laying limp in his arms. With only a nod of his head they proceeded out of there and back to the clan compound. I later learned that they spent the entire 5-day trip in complete silence with Naruto never leaving her side once, and he was always the one to carry her. When they got back it was with a heavy heart that the 2 clansmen told the rest of them what happened. Naruto just brushed past them all and went to his and Akara's room and didn't come out until the next day when the funeral was held. I learned when I came by the next time, which was a month after it happened, that Naruto cried for the first time in over 8 years. I knew this because Sandaime told me he hasn't cried since he was 6. When I arrived I went to talk to Naruto and Akara and see how things were with them, but when I found him, he just looked at me with steel-cold eyes and walked right past me. I called out to him, but he never stopped walking. I went to talk to the clan head and learned of the entire ordeal. I was shocked into silence for a good few minutes, but I eventually came out of it and asked how Naruto had dealt with it. He told me Naruto's training regiment increased by at least double, and no matter what they did to try to talk him out of his insane training, he wouldn't listen. He reverted back to the way he was before he met Akara, but this time his attitude was absolutely cold and merciless to others. When I went to confront him again and talk to him about leaving and training with me, he downright refused me and told me he would finish his training until he mastered everything they had to offer him. Then, and only then would he leave the clan and go with him. I didn't argue with him about this fact, especially when he said it would be what Akara would want him to do. The office was eerily silent after Jiraiya finished his heart-wrenching tale. Both of them were thinking about their favorite blonde that had so much taken from him in his relatively short life and the amount of pain he has had to go through. Is that everything, Jiraiya? You still haven't told me when you two got back together and did some of your own training? She questioned sadly. Jiraiya looked up and flinched slightly. Unfortunately, no, that isn't everything that happened. By the tone of his voice, Tsunade just knew this was more bad news. I need to know everything about Jiraiya. Please continue. She said softly. Jiraiya gulped and nodded his head dejectedly. After the incident, I knew Naruto wouldn't listen to me no matter what I said, so I left him with 20 different scrolls on some B to A rank justices to train in. I was hoping they would help distract him from what happened. I left after that and didn't return for a good month like always. When I did return, Naruto was still cold to everyone, but this time he would at least talk to me. He would give nothing away on his skills he learned from the Raishin clan, but he told me he learned 11 of the justice I gave him, the others he was still working on. I left after a rather one-sided conversation. The only useful thing I learned from him and his clansmen was that Naruto's training was going at a startlingly fast rate and he was learning everything the clan had to offer. They said in another couple months, he would know every technique the clan knew and would only have to master them. This continued for the next 6 months without much change happening. I would visit and learn a little more about Naruto's skills, but I would never learn everything. Then I would give him some scrolls to learn from and let him be at his request. This all changed though when I was in Suna getting a possible lead on Akatsuki. When I arrived there, I went to one of my informants and asked for any important information. I was expecting something on Akatsuki, but when he told me something different, it surprised me. It scared the hell out of me though when he finished talking. I nearly scared the poor guy to death when I slammed him against the wall and demanded if he knew it was true. He managed to stutter out that it was before I dropped him on the ground and ran as fast as I could out of the country and towards the clouds. What did he tell you? Tsunade was irritated that he kept dancing around the facts. Said man looked down and mumbled something that she couldn't hear and she asked him to repeat it. He said that the Raishin clan in Cloud Country was going to be attacked by both the Sound and Iwa forces at midnight that day. Tsunade's breath caught in her throat and a shocked look crossed her face. The entire clan was attacked. When I heard the message from my informant, I ran as fast as I could towards the Cloud Country, but I knew I'd be too late by at least a couple days' time, even at my fastest pace with no sleep whatsoever. I started to panic when it turned into night, and then I thought of something that could help me get there faster. I summoned Gamabunta. He tried arguing with me, but just my glare and a short explanation of what was happening had him helping as fast as he could towards the cloud. Even still, I didn't make it there until around 8 in the morning the next day. Gamabunta immediately left as he was exhausted, but I kept going into the forest that I knew the clan compound to reside in. When I got there, Tsunade could see the pained expression on his face and urged him to continue. After taking a shaky breath, he explained further. When I reached the clan compound, I knew I was entirely too late. There were no chakra signatures around whatsoever. That meant only one of two things: they were either all dead or they escaped before the attack. I prayed it was the latter, but it wasn't. When I passed through the tree line and into the open field where the compound was, I found the outer walls to be destroyed. I rushed inside and immediately knew I was too late. There were bodies littering the floor everywhere. Both Raishin clansmen and enemy ninja. I searched for a good 20 minutes for survivors before I found him. His voice trailed off again before he took a couple of deep breaths to calm his trembling hands and voice. I found Naruto. He was impaled to a wall through the gut using a sword. Tsunade's eyes stretched out to dangerous proportions, but before she could say anything, Jiraiya continued. I of course went and checked to see if he was alive and found he was barely clinging to life. He had the obvious stomach wound, multiple scratches and cuts, one broken rib and a fractured leg joint. After assessing his wounds, I took him off the sword as gently as I could and healed him to the best of my abilities. Even with Kyuubi's healing factor to help him out, it still took a full 4 days to heal and close over spotless. Even so, he didn't wake up for a good week and a half. He was in the hospital in Cloud Country for that time period. I put a high-level genjutsu on myself to hide my identity, and Naruto changed so much by that time that no one would recognize him in any way. Also, it wasn't a ninja hospital, so he didn't need a genjutsu to hide, but I didn't want to risk anyone knowing who he was regardless. So I had to put him under a genjutsu to change his hair and eye color just to make sure. I'm not sure if any ninja ever went to the clan compound from Cloud Country, but I'm sure they did. During this time I helped burn everyone that was killed during the attack, as that was their clan's burial ritual. I had to act as one of their citizens, as the place was covered with Cloud Ninja. We didn't dig a grave, but burned the bodies, and then we put up some tombstones or plates in their honor. We did that for everyone. After getting all the bodies out, we looked through the place to see if there were any technique scrolls, but all of them were either destroyed or taken during the attack. After that I went around and asked if anyone knew anything about the attack. I learned that there was a rather large force of Iowa and Sound Nins around that day of attack. They never crossed the border though, from what the guards could gather. But when we looked through the bodies, there were multiple dead Sound and Iowa Nins around, though none of them had any way to affiliate them with their villages. Cloud still doesn't know how such a big force of ninja could get into the country without being seen or heard and then attack an entire clan, but they did. It didn't help that the clan compound was a good 40 miles away from the village, as they liked to separate themselves from the ninja. We know for a fact it was Iowa and Sound that attacked the village though. We don't have any proof, but the attack damage left is enough. There were multiple rocks Justice used and some of the bodies had ruptured ears. That, and the fact that there were fang marks on some of the bodies with snake venom in their system, proves that they were there. It also shows that Orochimaru personally decided to help in the attack, as only 3 people can summon snakes. Orochimaru himself, Anko, and then possibly Sasuke. We know it's Orochimaru because there was poison in some people's systems. After I knew what happened, I stayed with Naruto the entire time in the hospital. When he woke up a week and a half later, he just stared at the ceiling, and no matter what I would do he wouldn't respond. I was afraid this had finally broken him, but he eventually responded. He told me he would personally kill Orochimaru himself, and any Sound and Iowa ninja he came across he would kill without question. After that he refused to talk again about the subject, but told me he was ready to travel with me now. The same day he woke up, he left the hospital much to the nurse's frustrations, mind you. He said quickly seeing the glare sent his way for letting Naruto leave the hospital after such an attack. Besides, he was perfectly healthy now, well besides the mental trauma, but he wouldn't let that show. After paying our respects at the compound, we left the country to do some traveling and more training. No matter how I approached the subject of the attack on the compound, Naruto would always give me the cold shoulder, or he would just glare at me until I dropped it. Eventually he relented after enough bugging and told me a very brief explanation of the events. He told me the clan was attacked at exactly midnight, and since most of the people were asleep, they were killed rather fast. Then came some enormous snakes that started to attack everyone in the clan. They were able to destroy the summoned snakes, but they did major damage. By that time half the clan was wiped out and the rest were soon to follow. Naruto himself told me he was the last one standing and he saw everyone die, and that's when he was overwhelmed and taken out. He was stabbed through the gut by none other than Orochimaru and pinned to the wall. After that he stopped talking and I couldn't get anything out of him again for the next 5 months about the attack on his clan. I almost don't want to ask, but I have to know what happened over the next 5 months. She winced just thinking about the possibilities. Jiraiya gave her a reassuring smile, even though it was by no means what a smile should look like. It was more like a twitch of the lips that didn't go down. Nothing bad happened for those 5 months I was with him, if that's what you're thinking about. This reason to lower her dreadful thought down fortunately. Seeing this look he continued. Over the next 5 months I trained Naruto in different justice I knew and assessed his skills. He still trained like mad, but he never seemed to go all out it seemed. He was holding back for some reason, and when I asked him why he would just look at me and shrug before telling me a ninja never reveals all his secrets. I wanted to know what level he was at, so I challenged him to a few fights setting different rules each time. What are his skills, Jiraiya? I need to know so I can give him a test to see if he deserves a higher rank than Genin. Tsunade immediately asked once she heard Jiraiya say he tested his skills. I can assure you, he is well past any Genin rank, let alone his maturity is that of an Anbu captain. I assessed that all of his skills are at least low Jounin level if not higher. He refused to use anything that he learned in his training with the Racian clan, preferring to keep it a secret. So he didn't use any lightning justices that I know he has in his arsenal. He would use his sword though, which I can tell you right now, is unrivaled by any I have met. The skill he shows with a sword is off the charts. Even Heiichiku, the guy that was attacked during the Chunin exams Naruto was in, and survived the attack he was in, even though he didn't wake up until after the invasion happened. His skills are superior to Heiichi's by far when it comes to using a sword, and probably everything else too. Let alone the attacks he mostly likely knows using a sword that he never showed in our fights. Whenever he drew his sword he would never use any attack in conjunction, even though I know there are some. Even still he is deadly with a weapon if he wants to be. Overall I would give him a test that will push him to use his skills to the max. A person with at least high jounin skills. Jiraiya trailed off, seeing the look in Tsunadi's eyes. A person like Hada Kakashi? She asked innocently. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at her in suspicion. His old sensei, he's the strongest jounin in the village, is he not? Hi. Was the immediate response. He's been training like crazy since Sasuke's defection and Naruto leaving the village. He feels it's partly his fault for Naruto getting hurt and Sasuke running away. Since then he's gotten a lot stronger, and not just him either, everyone has gotten stronger. She finished with a small grin. Jiraiya couldn't help the grin that slowly took up his face. Kakashi would be an excellent choice then. If he's gotten so much stronger, then I want to see his level also, and Naruto should be able to bring out a good portion if not all of his skills and power. Alright, when do you want to have him tested? I like this idea. His smirk said all anyone needed to know. Naruto, how strong have you become? Tsunade asked the wind, but it was easily carried out to Jiraiya. He frowned, but before he could say anything she continued. To come from such a horrid past in this village and come out on top of it all and happy at that, even if we could still see your sadness once in a while. Then to go through all of this over the past 2.5 years, why do you have to live such a sad life, Naruto? She asked no one in particular while looking at her desk. I don't know. She looked up to see it was Jiraiya that answered her. But I do know this, he's a fighter through, and he'll get through this one way or another. He's a strong man, no matter who you are, you have to admit that little fact. He's never given up before, and I doubt I'll live to see the day when he does give up. There was a lengthy pause while they both thought over their words carefully. Finally it was broken when Tsunade asked a question. This entire time there has been a question that has been bugging me non-stop. Does he still want to be Hokage? She asked attentively. Jiraiya looked her straight in the eyes and saw the brief hope shining in them before they were squashed by his next words. I don't know anymore. He hasn't even mentioned being Hokage once the entire time we were together, so I just don't know. I see. Thank you for telling me everything, Jiraiya. I needed to know what happened over the last 2.5 years to turn him so cold. Now I know the reasoning, and I can honestly say that I don't see any other way he should be after so many tragic events have happened to him. It saddens me greatly, but I can understand why he is this way. I just hope he will let his friends back into his heart and eventually us also. She said sadly. Jiraiya could only smile sadly in front of her and hoped for the best also. He knew without a doubt in his mind that Naruto would eventually become one of the strongest people in the world, if not the strongest to ever live. The way he kept getting stronger and stronger every time you met him was proof of that. It was only a matter of time before he claimed his rightful place in this world. He even idly thought that Naruto might even surpass Yondaime in skills and power. Jiraiya. Tsunade's voice brought him out of his thoughts for him to look at her and not past her. Hi. Tomorrow at 1 in the afternoon we're going to have Naruto tested, please tell him this. I want you to spread the word to Kakashi to be here at my office at 10 in the morning. That way he'll arrive here at noon. At that time I want you and me to explain to him that he'll test Naruto and a few other things also. Make sure you tell Hei to also be at the training field where Naruto's testing will take place. I want his assessment on what Naruto's skills are with a sword. Jiraiya nodded in understanding before he thought of a question himself. Ah, where will he be tested? Tsunade only smirks at him. Training field 7 of course. She said it like it was the most logical thing in the world. Jiraiya just stared at her for a few seconds before shrugging. Are all the great shinobi of our village tested there? Tsunade blinked at him in confusion before realization dawned on her. You mean like how the Sandaime, Yondaime, and all 3 Sannin were trained on that field and how they all fought their mentors there as a test? Jiraiya could only nod as he grinned. The field is destined to have famous and powerful people tested on its soils, I guess. Tsunade couldn't help but grin at him. Indeed. As they said this they both looked out towards the Hokage monument and gazed at its magnificent beauty. Though they had to apply chakra to their eyes to see it at all, it didn't even occur to them until a few seconds later. Wow, time flies by when you're telling a story. I better get going, Tsunade. Jiraiya said after he noticed it was well past dark out and it must be rather late out, so he got up to leave. I'll make sure Haddock and Jeku know about tomorrow. Until then. He waved as he disappeared from his spot like he was a ghost. I see even you learned a few tricks over the last 2.5 years, Jiraiya. Tsunade said as she looked at the spot he used to be standing in. She turned back around and gazed at the village looking for an orange spot, but she knew she wouldn't find one. Naruto, you called Hokage-sama. Looking up from the horrors of paperwork, Tsunade saw just the person she was waiting for to show up. Kakashi, just on time. She said with a smile. She noticed he wore his same clothes that he always had on. Blue Anbu-style pants with a kunai pouch on his right leg. The standard green jounin vest and his Konoha headband tilted so it was covering his left eye from view. Said man looked at her in confusion and looked at the wall where the clock was. It said it was high noon. He looked back at Tsunade and saw her grinning at him like she won the lottery. "Did I miss Hokage-sama?" He asked warily. He knew a pissed-off Sannin was not a good thing, but one with super strength that could easily send you through walls was definitely on his avoid list. And if he wasn't mistaken, he could have sworn that summoned frog he got from Jiraiya said to be in Tsunade's office at 10 not noon. "No Kakashi, I just planned ahead for your little late arrival, that's all. Now sit down, we have much to discuss." Her voice was commanding and held no room for argument. Kakashi gulped, still not knowing if he was in trouble or not, and if he was he would be in a world of pain most likely later that day. "Oh come on Tsunade, there's no reason to freak the poor guy out." Both Kakashi and Tsunade looked over towards the window and saw none other than Jiraiya coming through it and walking towards the far wall before leaning against it calmly. "Jiraiya-sama, if you're here then Naruto is back in the village with you, right?" He asked curiously, hoping his assumption was right. Jiraiya only nodded in the affirmative and gave a jerk of his head towards Tsunade. Looking over her way, he was surprised to see a very serious look on her face. "Kakashi," said man sat up straighter in his chair as the harsh voice rubbed his ears. "I have a mission for you. If you accept this mission, you will go in solo, and it could possibly be fatal even for a person of your caliber, as we're not sure of the target's current strengths or weaknesses. This mission will be considered a high rank mission, but there will be no pay for it, as you have already accepted an agreement prior to this one concerning it. Do you accept knowing all these facts?" Tsunade asked while never breaking eye contact with the man. After several seconds of contemplation, he answered. "Who's the target and what would you like to be done to target Hokage-sama?" "Uzumaki Naruto." Kakashi's eyes widened hearing the name, but Tsunade ignored it. "And all you have to do is fight him until one of you surrenders or is unconscious." Kakashi's brain was working overtime trying to process all the information he was just given. "Is Naruto really that strong now that you suggest he could possibly kill me?" was the first thing he asked, ignoring the question of the mission. Tsunade glared at him for another question. "No more questions or answers until you accept or deny the mission of Haddock." The two of them stared at each other for a few more seconds before Kakashi shrugged his shoulders. "Hi, I accept the mission, Hokage-sama." Tsunade's serious look instantly disappeared and was replaced with a small smile. "Why the sudden change of heart, Kakashi? He was my student for a while, and like you said, I already made an agreement to be his sensei until he reached Chunin where I deemed him ready to be alone, as a genin. By the sounds of it, he is strong enough to be at least low jounin level, and my guess is that having me fight him would be his test for promotion, am I correct?" he asked after analyzing every angle given to him. Tsunade smiled. "I always knew you had a good mind, Kakashi, yes, everything you said was correct. And to your earlier question on could Naruto possibly kill you, we don't know his skill level, so he might be able to. That's where you come in." Kakashi gave an understanding nod, but that turned into confusion a second later. "What do you mean you don't know his skill level? I thought you trained him for the last 2.5 years, Jiraiya-sama." He directed his question not at the Hokage, but the other Sannin in the room. Said man looked him in the eyes before replying. "I was only with him for 5 months of the time. What about the other 2 years and 1 month? He was training with the Ration clan the entire time," was the immediate given response. Kakashi looked confused now. "Who are the Ration clan and why haven't I heard of them?" "They're an elite clan of Kumo, Cloud, Country, and they specialize in swords. The reason you haven't heard of them is because the clan keeps to themselves most of the time and separates themselves from the ninja of the village, even though they know many powerful jutsu to go along with their sword fighting and without." Jiraiya explained to him and Tsunade herself somewhat, seeing as she only knew the basics of the clan. "I see, so you want me to evaluate his skills and see what he's capable of doing. Is there any other piece of advice I should be given before this fight, and speaking of that, when is the match?" Kakashi asked curiously. "Right to the point, I see." Tsunade said, getting back on task. "Right, the match will be today in little less than an hour's time at Training Field 7. As for advice, ask Jiraiya, as I'm not too sure of them myself. He's the one that knows the most about his skills, and Naruto never showed his full abilities to him either." Both of them looked at Jiraiya with eager eyes. "I told Tsunade everything I know about his skills in general." He started off. "For one, he has a rather impressive display of I taught him, around 300, so look out for more than just cage buncheons. Speaking of that, he rarely uses it anymore." He trailed off, looking out into space before focusing all his attention on Kakashi and giving him a stern look. "When you two fight, treat him like any other enemy ninja out there that you encounter for the first time. He is no longer the carefree Naruto you used to know. He's a cold-hardened fighter when he wants to be, and he will kill you without a second thought if you give him the chance." Kakashi looked ready to interrupt, but Jiraiya held up his hand, silencing him before he could even talk. "I know what you were about to say, Kakashi. For reasons I'm not willing to tell you or anyone else for that matter besides Tsunade, Naruto has changed drastically. He's not a carefree idiot anymore, but a real shinobi. He's killed before, and one more won't matter to him. Do you understand this? His voice was like steel and impossible to penetrate or argue with. "Hi Jiraiya-sama," he said with an equally serious voice, but he couldn't help but wonder what could have happened to cause Naruto to turn out like they were talking about. He would just have to wait and see Naruto for himself to make a judgment on his new skills and attitude. "Good, because I don't want you to die for believing this was the same idiotic Naruto that you all knew. Now I'm going to leave all of his known skills out besides the amount of knowledge he knows from me, which I already told you about. I want this to be a fair fight after all. He doesn't know your own personal skills and secrets, so it's only fair. But I will give you one bit of advice. No matter what, when, and if he draws his sword, be on full alert and go all out. Naruto is deadly with that sword of his," he finished seriously. Kakashi looked between the two Sannin and nodded his head in understanding. "I didn't have any intention of treating him with anything but the utmost respect as a shinobi. In this career, anyone can be the death of you if you're not on guard." "Good, you are dismissed Kakashi. I expect you to be at the training grounds at exactly 1 o'clock and no later, is that understood?" she asked threateningly. Kakashi nodded his head absent-mindedly, already lost in thoughts about what Naruto could be like now and how strong he was. He waved his hand after being dismissed and sunshine out of the office with a classic poof of smoke. He had no intention of being late for this meeting. Not a minute later the door to Tsunade's office was kicked open and banged against the wall, with the handle embedded into the plaster holding it wide open. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya tense up for a fight but relax when they notice it was only Guy and his 3 old students standing behind him looking sheepish for letting him do that. Tsunade glared at the man that was looking around the room frantically. "What do you think you're doing, Guy?" she yelled at the man in irritation. Said man looked up at her like he just noticed she was in the room for the first time. This only helped fuel her already building temper at having a person barge into her office unannounced. "Hokage-sama, what are you doing here?" he asked clueless. "This is my office, you moron," she yelled while throwing a paperweight at him. Said moron was sent into the wall by the paperweight of death, as others like to call it. It only became a deadly weapon when in her hands, as that super strength was rather scary. The others in the office winced in sympathy for the drowned man, but not 2 seconds later he was up and standing like nothing happened. "I'm so sorry for my most unyouthful entrance, Hokage-sama, but I was looking for my eternal rival Kakashi. He seems to be running away from our scheduled fight, which is most unyouthful of him," he added as an afterthought. The others in the room winced at his use of the word unyouthful, as if it was a crime to say it. "Now that's a thought, I could make it into a lot," Tsunade thought with glee, but quickly shot it down when she thought of the obnoxious duo when they heard of her intentions. They would never leave her alone. Said obnoxious duo were currently screaming different tasks at each other about if they couldn't find Kakashi, they would do something that was practically impossible. The duo was none other than Mido Guy and Rock Lee, his apprentice. "Enough. If that's all you wanted, then get out and leave Kakashi alone today, he won't be able to fight you." She was irritated at their little antics. They both stopped instantly and Guy looked at her curiously. "If I may ask, why can't I fight Kakashi today?" "Is he hurt?" he asked in a calm voice. Tsunade sighed and looked towards Jiraiya, who only shrugged his shoulders at her stare. The questioning look was easy to translate. "Should I tell them? Kakashi will be fighting Naruto today to gauge his current skill level," she said after a few seconds of thought. Team Guy, as that's what they were called, consisted of Tenten, a Chunin, Hyuga Niji, a new Jounin, Rock Lee, a Chunin, and Mido Guy, another Jounin, and the most powerful of them all. They were just about to comment on what she just said when they heard a cocky voice from behind them. "So the dope has finally returned." Team Guy looked behind them and saw the old teammate standing not 5 feet from them. The one who spoke was none other than Inyazuka Kiba. The whole team consisted of Yuhi Kurenai, a Jounin, and the strongest on the team, Inyazuka Kiba, a Chunin, Hyuga Hinata, a Chunin, and Abiram Shino, a Chunin. And he'll be fighting one of the strongest Jounin in the village. I'd love to see his ass get kicked. Where is it taking place? He grinned at the rest of them, ignoring the glares he was getting, or maybe he was just clueless about them. "Kiba, why you shouldn't talk about Naruto-kun like that?" Hinata stuttered out after hearing about her crush being back in the village. "That dope? Nah, he'll never beat Kakashi. He's just too strong of a fighter for him," he said without thinking about it. "Kiba, you really shouldn't judge people before you know them, a lot can happen in 2.5 years. Naruto might be strong enough to win." Kurenai argued with her former student. "No way, I could beat the dope no problem, and I'm no match for Kakashi," he said confidently. "Kind of like how you beat him during the Chunin exams?" Niji asked him rhetorically. Kiba whirled in the voice that talked. "Hey. He got lucky during that fight, and besides, he beat you, to remember." Niji just glanced at him. "That's the entire point, you moron." "Hey. I'm not a moron, you prick." he yelled back in offense. Niji didn't falter though. Like your former sensei said, a lot can change in 2.5 years, and those Chunin exams were a long time ago. And in case you don't remember, a shinobi is supposed to learn from their past mistakes. You'd think after losing once to him after you underestimated his skills, you'd be smart enough not to judge his skills by a title given to him when he was in the academy, and not even a ninja. Why you little Kiba stepped forward threateningly, but got only 2 steps before he was stopped by a loud commanding voice. Enough. I won't have my ninja squabbling like little children fresh out of the academy. You're a ninja, so act like it. Tsunade yelled at them all. Kiba looked sheepish, but Niji just nodded his head in understanding. The others watched on to see where this conversation would go. Sitting back down at her desk, Tsunade leaned back in her chair and massaged her temple with a frown marrying her face. If you want to come watch the fight, then be my guest, but you will not interfere in any way whatsoever. If you prove to be a distraction, then I'll have you removed immediately. Is that understood? She asked the current occupants of her office. Everyone nodded in understanding. They all wanted to see how Naruto has been and how much he's changed. The fact they get to see his skills in action against one of the best if not the best jounin in the village was just a huge bonus. Good, then let's get going. I'd rather not be late to one of my own meetings I set up, she said as she got up and grabbed her jacket before heading out the door, followed quickly behind by the others in the office. The other people that showed up in her office seemed to dismiss the fact that they went to her office with an intention in mind but discarded it to see the upcoming fight. By the time they made it to the training field, they had added one more guest to their group. One Haruno Sakura, former teammate of Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. Having finally gotten there, they noticed Kakashi was already leaning against a tree, but there was something curious about him. He was standing without his Ichi Paradise book in his hand and he wasn't giggling perversely. When they walked into the clearing, a man looked up from the ground and waved the others over. Well, you brought quite the crew with you, but aren't we missing one other person? You did say 1 o'clock, right, Hokage-sama? He asked once they were within hearing range. Tsunade only nodded her head while looking around the clearing for any signs of the young man that should be here by now. Looking at her watch, she noticed they arrived slightly early by a few seconds and was about to tell the others to wait for Naruto when she saw something coming out of the tree lines across from them. Turning in that direction, she saw it was the person they were waiting for. The only other person to sense him was Jiraiya, but the others noticed them looking into the tree lines and followed their gazes. When Naruto walked into view, some in the group gasped, others tensed by the new look he sported. The ones that gasped were the old rookie 9 that was there. The ones that tended were Guy, Kurenai, and Kakashi. Both Jiraiya and Tsunade were already used to the new look and the cold eyes, so they weren't affected. The others weren't as lucky, as they could do nothing but stare for a few seconds before it was broken by Naruto talking. You summoned me, Hokage-sama? He asked, referring to only her and ignoring all the others around him. The others in the clearing that had gotten their wits together in time to hear scowled at him. Kiba was one of those people. What? No hello after such a long time, dope? He asked while his dog whimpered at him from behind, but he ignored the enormous dog that reached to his stomach on height. Akamaru was saying, having his full attention on the person in front of him. The only indicator that Naruto even heard him was the slight glance he gave him from the corner of his eyes before he turned his eyes back to the Hokage who was frowning at him. This only seemed to irritate him more though. Why you? Do you think you're so good that you can ignore me now? He yelled, stepping forward threateningly. Enough. Tsunade yelled out, sensing and seeing the incoming fight that was sure to happen. She knew for a fact that Kiba would get his ass handed to him if what Jiraiya had to say was true. That, and the fact that she was one of only 6, the Jounin, and above-ranked people who saw the kunai Naruto had in his hand. The second she yelled, though, she noticed the kunai disappearing into his trench coat again. The others that saw this were slightly disturbed by the actions he would have taken if things turned into a fight, but let it slide for now. I didn't allow you to come here so you could interfere with Kiba. Have you already forgotten what I said while we were in my office? Tsunade asked him directly. Kiba only grumbled under his breath, but he stepped back, remembering that Naruto would soon get his ass kicked by Kakashi anyway, so he didn't need to do anything for now. Good, now let's get back to why we're here, Tsunade said, turning back to Naruto. Uzumaki Raijin Naruto. The others looked at her like she grew a second head when she added the Raishin to his name, but knew not to interrupt when she was talking. I have called you here today so your skills in combat can be tested against an opponent of my choosing, so the village of Konoha has a record of your skills and they're not being wasted on meaningless missions. This test will also be a promotion if you prove your skills are effective enough for me to beseech you with a higher rank. Do you understand your purpose here today, Uzumaki? She asked with a harsh voice and being completely serious. The others frowned at her tone of voice, knowing of the two's relationship and how they thought of each other. But looking at Naruto, they expected to see some kind of sadness or frown, but all he showed was a neutral face and a calm exterior. "Hi Hokage-sama," he answered after a glance at the others in the clearing behind her. She saw this, but said nothing about it. "Good, your opponent will be Hada Kakashi. Did you bring all your equipment needed for a fight?" Naruto turned his eyes towards the Cyclops that was still leaning against a tree staring intently at him. He looked him over with a glance and noticed he hasn't changed his outfit much from before he left the village to train. He turned his eyes back to Tsunade and nodded in the affirmative. "I'm ready for combat at all times, Tsunade-sama." He corrected himself seeing the glare he got for saying Hokage the first time and the second. "I see, if that's the case then you have the entire field 7 at your disposal. You may start when I give the signal. The only rules are you don't kill each other and your opponent has to come out in one piece. The match will stop when I either call it, one of you is unconscious, or one of you gives up." All she got for an answer was a small nod from each of them as they turned to face each other. Seeing everything was in order, Tsunade led the others in the clearing to the tree lines and jumped into the trees. After finding one that was relatively high, with enough branches for everyone to sit or stand on, she turned her attention back onto the field. The first thing she noticed was that Kakashi was still leaning against the same tree and Naruto was still facing him looking calmly at the other man staring him down. From what she could tell, they hadn't stopped staring the entire time. The only thing different about them was that Naruto had sealed his cloak into a scroll on his body. Shaking her head she cleared her throat. "You can begin whenever you're ready." She yelled out loudly so they would hear her from her position in the tree lines, with the others observing right around her. For several seconds it seemed like neither of them would do anything but stare at each other, but then Kakashi sighed, bringing their attention to him. Standing his full height, Kakashi looked right at his opponent. "It's good to see you, Naruto. I see the 2.5 years of training were well spent." All he got in return was silence. Frowning for the lack of communication he moved his left arm slightly upwards, but he had to abandon this action immediately unless he wanted to be impaled by several shuriken coming his way. Jumping to the side while still keeping his eyes focused on the perpetrator that was Naruto, he looked out some of his own shuriken and threw them at his still motionless opponent. Seeing the incoming attacks, Naruto also jumped to the side heading the same way Kakashi was heading, towards the trees. Frowning seeing his tactic coming up he skidded on the ground and went through 4 seals at slow down in speed. Putting his right hand up to his mouth after taking a deep breath Naruto finished his pain. Bikaku no, fire. Grand fireball, the ball of fire that came out of his mouth, headed towards the tree lines right in front of Kakashi, effectively stopping him in his tracks unless he wanted to get burned. Jumping forward after his attack was successful, he appeared in front of the startled Kakashi with a kunai out ready to use. Bringing the kunai down, Naruto hit another kunai from Kakashi trying to block it. Naruto didn't let this deter him though, and with a slight push of chakra in his left foot, he flipped over Kakashi who stumbled forward from the loss of pressure and received a kunai between the eyes from the overhead Naruto. Landing on the ground, Naruto didn't even look when he heard a popping sound but kept his eyes to the front. The Kakashi that he just killed was nothing more than a log that was used in a Kawamura replacement. Staring at his opponent he frowned when he realized he didn't accomplish stopping Kakashi. "I see it won't be that easy, Kakashi." Naruto spoke up slowly. "Indeed," the man responded. He was standing 10 feet from Naruto with his left hand over his head and ready to raise it. "You've definitely improved, Naruto, I'll need this to keep up." With that statement he raised his headband showing his Sharingan eye. The eye was blood red with 3 black tomes. "Shall we?" He gestured for Naruto to come with his hand. Naruto watched him slightly more cautiously now that he had the Sharingan out, but he didn't let it deter him, if anything it only made the fight more interesting. Making 3 seals at a civilian speed Naruto leaned slightly to the side and then back to the other side. Kakashi frowned seeing this as his Sharingan picked up like child's play but let Naruto do whatever he was going to do. "You know with the Sharingan I can see through any genjutsu, right Naruto?" Kakashi asked his former student. Naruto didn't seem concerned at all though and only continued to sway on his feet for 10 seconds before he stumbled to the right. That's when this took effect and his body seemed to travel to the side at high speed, even for a Jounin level ninja, leaving after images of his body in its wake, and then it just disappeared from view 15 feet from where it started. Kakashi watched all of this with caution. He knew exactly where Naruto was, but to use that was another thing entirely. It was a low to mid-range chunin genjutsu, nothing that a Jounin would fall for, especially him, seeing as his Sharingan could see through all genjutsu. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.